I'll just be cameras off. So it is going. It is your show, Randy.
All right. Thanks for joining us today for answers to frequently asked questions about adapted physical education. I am going to be turning this over to Bernadette Laughlin and Megan Flowers. They are both from the Ohio Department of Education's Office for Exceptional Children. So go ahead, ladies.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. We are absolutely thrilled to be here today. And I want to thank Randy for that FERPA warning. That's always good to remember, and be careful about, maybe you don't say the name, but that personally identifiable information. She's absolutely right. We have to be very careful about that. And I know you all know that, but it's always good to have a reminder. And it's just really great to be here to talk with you about adaptive physical education. And Randy is my go-to on regular physical education, because I don't always know the requirements and what regular physical ed requires. And as we go along, you'll see why that's important, what we're talking about. I am with the Ohio Department of Education. I'm the Related Services Education Program Specialist. And I'm going to take this moment to say adaptive physical education is not a related service, and we'll talk more about that later. But a lot of people think it is, and it ends up being treated that way. My background is that I was a school speech language pathologist for many, many years. I then got a master's degree in educational policy and leadership, and took on some leadership roles in my district and got interested in special education law. So then I went to law school and became an attorney in special education. And I've been with the department now for 11 years. I worked as the speech language consultant, and then I worked in the dispute resolution section in coordinating the due process system. So I have kind of a unique background in that way, and I'm happy to share my knowledge and experience with you. But I just want to say, as you all know very well, special education is a very unique little niche of law, and there's a lot of gray areas and nuances and a lot to learn. So I feel like I'm learning all the time. Every day I learn something new, and I'm just, we're in this together is the way I look at it. And I'm just here to be as helpful as I can. But I want to thank all of you for the wonderful work that you do in working with our students with disabilities and helping to educate regular education about, the capabilities of our students with disabilities, and the capabilities that they do have, and educating everyone in that way. And I will turn this over to Megan, who will introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Megan Flowers. I am also in the Office for Exceptional Children on the Diverse Learner team. I focus on students who have low incidence disabilities and sensory disabilities. And, I can echo all of Bernadette's sentiments about your work, and I appreciate everyone coming today. I'm really just tagging along with Bernadette. She loops me in on some of this content, and I've just been working with her and learning a lot from her regarding this. So we're going to go through kind of a lot of things that we've heard and gone through at the department. My background is an intervention specialist for students with low incidence disabilities. And then I went on to get my educational leadership master's, and now I've moved on into the department. I was on both the supports and monitoring team and the diverse learner team. So I look forward to being here. Thanks for inviting me. And hopefully we can learn a lot through this presentation together.
Okay.
I'll hand it to you.
Okay, today we're going to be talking about the requirements of physical education for students with disabilities, obviously, and we're going to review our guidance in the Office for Exceptional Children, and then we're going to answer some of the frequently asked questions. And I just want to give Megan the credit for the wonderful pictures you're going to see in this presentation. She is, has this artistic side that I don't have, and I am just so thrilled with the pictures in here. I think you will be too. Hey, Megan.
So we're going to talk just a little bit, start off with IDEA. So obviously we know that IDEA has the provision, and that free and appropriate public education for all students, and that includes students with disabilities, obviously, to special education and related services that meet their needs. And so that's kind of where, you know, APE originates from IDEA, because we're meeting the unique needs of the students that we have. And so we need to basically utilize all of these tools to make the best decisions for what the child needs. And it looks different based on the different needs that the child has in the IEP.
So our next slide here is FAPE, and that's that free appropriate public education. And isn't that picture awesome? I just love that. I think, you know, we throw that word around a lot, FAPE and denial of FAPE and things like that. But what does that actually mean? Well, this is what you see on the slide is what the regs say. It's provided at public expense. You have to meet the state standards. It means an appropriate education in a public school, and it's in conformity with an IEP. But what does that look like in practice? Well, in simple terms, it means making progress on IEP goals and in the general curriculum. Okay, we can go on to the next one then.
Then, of course, gets into some more of the, from IDEA, we're getting kind of, you know, smaller and smaller here. Now we're talking about education. So physical education, we're talking here about students with disabilities and special education. So this is considered specially designed instruction. The APE teacher is a direct service provider, not a related service provider, as Bernadette said in the beginning, because physical education for children with disabilities is a federally mandated component of special education services. So this means that the physical education needs to be provided to the student with a disability as part of the special education services that the child and family receive, which is contrasted with physical therapy and occupational therapy, which are related services. These therapies are provided to the child with disabilities only if they need it to benefit from instruction. So there's where the difference is between the related service and the specially designed instruction, where a lot of confusion lies.
Yeah. Very good point, Megan. And this next slide talks about physical education and just kind of summarizes what Megan just said. It has to be available to every student with a disability, and if necessary, specially designed. And the students must have the opportunity to participate with non-disabled students, unless, again, the needs dictate something else. And I love the intense look on this young lady's face in this this photograph. Okay, we can go on to the next one.
So once again, because APE is a specially designed instruction, it means adapting to the needs of the student, the content, methodology, or delivery of instruction to address the unique needs of the student that result from the disability. So it's the same specially designed instruction definition in the law that applies to academic specially designed instruction. And so you're just utilizing it in a physical education context.
Okay, and this talks about AP. I'm sure we've all heard this, you know, the saying, special education is not a place, it's a set of services, which includes adapting instruction, meaning what's presented, how it's presented, and to address the unique needs of that child based on their disability. It can be, special ed can be provided in different locations, depends on student needs. However, IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is the special ed, the name for the special ed federal regulations, it strongly prefers that students receive their special education in the general education setting as much as is feasible, as much as it can be. And now we'll go on to some myths.
Yes, we have some myths here. I think we've, you know, debunked the first one here, that APE is not a related service. All students with disabilities must have APE. We're going to touch a little bit more on this during our frequently asked questions, but everything is dependent upon the students' individual needs. APE must be provided to students individually or in a small group in which all students are receiving APE. So we've talked a little bit about how they are supposed to participate with their non-disabled peers to the maximum extent that's appropriate. And we'll kind of talk a little bit more about that. And Bernadette and I have had the opportunity to get some experience working with adapted physical education teachers and to hear some of the unique scheduling and things that they're doing. So we hope we can share those with you during our frequently asked questions to how to work around, always having a pull out APE service so we can make sure we're meeting the least restrictive environment for each student. Students who receive APE cannot participate in regular physical education. This is also a myth. As we know, we would like for them to participate as much as they possibly can in regular physical education with the supports that they need.
Okay. And our APE teacher is actually a direct service provider. And this is on our next slide here, not a related service provider because special education's actually a part, a federally mandated component of special education. That should say physical education is a federally mandated component of special education. So, just if you ever thought that APE was a related service, raise your hand, because I'm one of those people that thought that for many years and sat in many IEP meetings where the APE teacher was writing in services as a related service provider, and we actually have it wrong in our Ohio operating standards. We have corrected it. It will be in the new revision that hopefully will be coming out pretty soon. We did correct it. So if you're reading our current operating standards, it is incorrect in there. We do have it incorrectly listed as a related service provider. It took Sarah Boney moving here from Arizona, from another state, to say, that's not right. And I remember the day I looked it up and went, oh my goodness, she's right. It is not a related service. So just keep that in mind. And I think it really is, for us, at least in Ohio, at least for those of us who have been around a while, it is kind of a mind shift to think of it in terms of it really is part of special education. And those of you who are providing adaptive physical education, you are direct service providers. Okay.
All right, so the guidance from the Office for Exceptional Children, which Bernadette kind of touched on, our operating standards, and they are in the revision process, but physical education, specially designed if necessary, must be made available to every child with a disability receiving a free and appropriate public education. Each child with a disability must be afforded the opportunity to participate in the regular physical education program available to non-disabled children. So it's very similar to other least restrictive environments. You want to be in that general class first and see what supports are needed until you need to be more restrictive, and then of course have a justification as to why that is occurring.
Okay, so here is just a summary of our guidance from the Office for Exceptional Children. APE, of course, is an IEP team decision. It is specially designed instruction. It is not a related service. And the AP instructor is a direct service provider, and physical education is federally mandated.
I think we've hit those points home at this point.
I think so too.
So adapting the program means modifying or adjusting the program. So only an adapted physical education teacher may provide adapted physical education. So that question is often brought up to us, which we'll get into. We have quite a few frequently asked questions towards the end of this presentation. However, a regular PE teacher may adapt the program to meet the needs of the student. So it just depends what the student needs are and how you're going to meet those needs.
Okay. So our next little piece of guidance here is about consultation with an APE instructor. If the student's receiving regular physical education that's modified or adjusted, and remember the regular phys ed teacher can modify or adapt or adjust physical education, but that's not APE. You have to have an APE to be providing APE. But then, there can be consultation with a certified APE teacher, and that would be listed in the supports for school personnel part of the IEP section of the IEP, in section 7 of the IEP.
In addition, you can also consult with other team members. So you could utilize the occupational therapist, the physical therapist, or the orientation and mobility training expert. And that's where it comes down to those individual student needs and how to best incorporate, everything, especially so there's generalization between those environments and the physical education classroom and then their daily living skills. So multiple people can be consulted for this.
Okay, so whether the student's going to be receiving regular physical education that's modified or adjusted or adapted to meet his or her needs, or whether there will be consultation with an APE teacher or PT, or whether that student has adaptive physical education, is always an IEP team decision.
Okay. So the Office for Exceptional Children suggests that utilizing an assessment tool so you can get some data to make these decisions with the IEP team and to support the student placement in the adaptive physical education or in adapting the physical education program for the student. There are multiple evaluation tools that are available where you can determine the program needs for the student with a disability. And this website right here, which I think I can drop in the chat, I may have to do this at the end because I'm presenting using my screen, but it presents just a summary of different evaluation tools. So the tools are not.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh, you froze, Megan.
For and see what your district uses or what your district possibly can use. It looks like it's taking a little bit to load here.
Well, there we go.
It looks like it's not pulling up the list right now. Oh, there we go. So
There
it will give you different assessment names.
Great.
And things like that. So you can browse this website. I will put it in the chat when I'm done presenting.
Okay. So, what we would say here is, as the physical education teacher or the adaptive physical education teacher, you will be viewed as the expert on the team. It is an IEP team decision, but we understand that as the expert on the team, people will be looking to you, to make that decision or to help them make the decision in terms of whether the student, does the student need adaptive physical education? So now we're getting into our question and answer part. And this first question that came up, I like this question a lot. And I've received it fairly frequently this school year. But basically, here it is. If a high school student, they've been receiving APE and they've met their PE requirements, do we still legally need to offer AP services if it's on the student's IEP? That's the question here. So we can go to the answer. And okay, remember, APE is not a related service. If that student has met their PE requirement and they don't want to continue to take PE as an elective, and the reason I say that, I had a very athletic son, and he always wanted to take PE electives, but I don't think many students do. But if that student doesn't want to, then the district's not obligated to provide APE. And once again, though, here's this caveat: unless the IEP team determines the student has some unique need requiring this PE. And this was actually in an OSEP policy letter from May of 2021. And OSEP is the Office for Special Education Programs. That is the U.S. Department of Education. And you may have heard us refer to, or you may be familiar yourself with OSEP letters, or we'll say an OSEP letter came out on this. And what happens is sometimes, it's not really clear in the law what a situation should be, or different states do it differently. So what people will do is write in to the Office for Special Education Programs and ask these questions, and then OSEP issues a letter to answer them. So, this was the answer. Since instruction and PE is included in the definition of special education, the IEP team, once again, you'll hear that a lot, must determine the extent to which the child can access the regular PE program, and then also to what extent PE is required as specially designed instruction to meet the child's unique needs. So, and this was an important thing in this letter, I think, that was kind of interesting. Even if a school does not provide physical education to children without disabilities in the same grades as children with disabilities, the school is not relieved of the duty to provide physical education to those students who have unique needs requiring physical education and have IEPs setting out PE as part of their special education. So that was kind of interesting. If the student is taking physical education as an elective, then the physical education would need to be adapted if necessary so that they could access that. But once they've met the PE requirement, and if they don't want to take phys ed as an elective, then the IEP team, and the IEP team hasn't determined any kind of a unique need, then there's no need to provide the adaptive physical education. You would need to meet, the IEP team would need to convene to remove the AEP, or you could use the IEP amendment process to remove it. And of course you would follow up, or your district rep would follow up with the appropriate prior written notice saying that it had been removed. Okay. On to our next question.
Okay, our next question: requirement for an APE certified instructor. Does a physical education teacher have to be a certified adapted physical education instructor to provide adapted physical education? I do think we touched on this during our presentation, but if APE is written on the student's IEP, as we know, not a related service, then it would have to be an APE certified instructor as that service provider. Only an APE certified PE instructor may provide the adapted physical education. However, a regular physical education teacher may adapt, modify, or adjust the program to meet the needs of the student.
Okay, and then our next question here is, if a student has a APE on their IEP, does that mean they need to attend the APE small group class at a different time than general PE? It's kind of common that students who receive APE all have the services together in a small group class with the APE teacher. Likely this is due to scheduling for the teachers and the APE instructor. However, when the same age general education peers have physical education, it's when a child with APE should, to the maximum extent appropriate again, engage with non-disabled peers. So the answer to that question, or no, wait a minute.
Yeah, this is
yeah, that's the answer. Okay.
There were kind of answers in the notes before, yes.
Okay. So, this does not, okay, yes, an APE has to provide, if that's what it says on the IEP, it has to be an APE to provide the service. However, this does not need to occur in a small group of all students receiving APE. And again, we're talking about LRE, least restrictive environment. It should be provided with regular peers as much as possible. So that definitely needs to be a consideration. Let's put it that way. The IEP teams really really need to look at that. Okay. Our next
Just to
question.
piggyback off of that, Bernadette, I know we've also seen students with APE that go to the general PE class, but they don't participate. And so that's not really a solution either. So we want
No.
to make sure that they're included in all the activities as determined appropriate. And, that might require getting creative with some of the activities so that they can participate.
Yes, I agree completely. That's a very good point, Megan.
All right, our next question. I think we touched this one as well during our presentation, but we did receive these all as questions. So Bernadette and I wanted to include all of the questions that we did receive. So APE for all IEPs. So if a student has an IEP, must they have APE services, which we know is determined based on the individual needs of the student, based on what the ETR team has identified as areas of need, and then the IEP team determined how those needs are best met for the student. So if the IEP team decides that the student requires adapted physical education, then it must be provided through the IEP as a specially designed instruction. Physical education must be offered to students with disability the same as it is offered to non-disabled students and may be adapted as necessary for students with disabilities. However, if the student is receiving regular physical education that is modified or adjusted to meet the physical education needs of the student, then there may be consultation with a certified APE teacher, and that would be listed in Section 7, supports for school personnel of the IEP. And as we mentioned, there may be also a consultation with other team members, such as the occupational therapist, physical therapist, orientation and mobility training expert, anyone who can help with the needs of this child. Whether the student receives adapted physical education or the modified physical education, or whether the consult takes place, all of these things are IEP team decisions based on data.
Okay. So this is a question we've been getting this year too, more than once. What if a student who has APE on their IEP transfers to a school district that does not have an APE instructor? Okay, so what do we do in that case? And y'all, I just want to say you're in demand, so there's a shortage of APE instructors for sure. I think we all know the answer to this one at this point. If that's what it says in the IEP, the school district's responsible, for the district, which in our case would be the district responsible for the education of the child district of residence, must provide the services directly or arrange for those services to be provided through another program. They may have to hire an APE teacher. They may have to find another program to provide those services. And that was also in that OSEP policy letter of May 2021.
I also put that in the chat, a link to that policy letter in the chat.
Thank you, Megan.
No problem. So this one kind of goes along with what Bernadette stated. We get this a lot in the absence of an APE instructor. IEP teams may be inclined to substitute a physical therapist for the specially designed physical education that has been determined necessary for the free and appropriate public education. So can you just then change the APE to physical therapy on the IEP because we're not having an APE instructor available, and PT could, is also physical. So the answer is no to that because PT is a related service. And the IEP must follow the procedures for adding a related service if it thinks that the student needs PT. And this is also in the OSEP letter, which that OSEP letter is just very interesting. I really suggest reading it. Leaves it up to the states. The regulations address separately the requirements for related service personnel and the qualifications for special education teachers. The determination of who is qualified to provide physical education as specially designed instruction, including APE, is dependent upon the state's policies and procedures. Adding PT as a related service would involve evaluating the needs of the child by a physical therapist, and then the IEP team making that team determination to add physical therapy. So just, amending it and transferring it over is not the process that you would follow. Removing the APE would also be an IEP team decision based on data provided that demonstrated the student no longer needs the APE to participate in physical education. So there are a lot of factors here So not that, this couldn't be a scenario that could occur, but it would be that the child no longer needs the services and then does need a different related service. So it's not as easy as just kind of switching it over.
So our next question is, if PE or AP is skipped, what is the requirement if physical education or adaptive phys ed teacher needs to skip a session? Okay, well, it's just like any other specially designed instruction. It must be delivered according to what the IEP says, and the team, of course, decides the amount of time and the frequency. And we, of course, advise, as with all special education services, that it be logged in writing, document, that the service was provided. Very important. And instruction in physical education is required by Ohio law. Schools are required to offer physical education each year to all students in grades kindergarten through grade 8. However, the law does not specify the number of hours required for students in grades K through 8. And I'm sure all of you know this better than I do. Students in grades 9 through 12 must obtain 120 hours to meet their graduation requirements. So, and of course, scheduling is determined by the local school district. You must implement the curriculum and instructional program, and characterized by systematic planning, articulation, evaluation. So it's really just not an option to skip the class or whatever. It is required. That's all I'm going to say about that. Okay.
Okay, here's one that we received about parent refusal. So the parent doesn't want the child in the general PE, mainstreamed in the general PE, but the IEP says that that's okay, that they can participate in the general PE. The document actually says that. So basically, there's a lot of factors to this because in initial IEP, you have to have written parental consent. It's not required for an annual review, but this disagreement should be logged somewhere in a prior written notice because, as we know, it's an IEP team decision. So if the parent disagrees during an IEP meeting, the district should document everything that occurred in that form. And there are many steps that could be taken during this time. So the parent can sign that they are in attendance and do not agree with a certain area on the signature page of the IEP. The district or parent can get assistance for facilitation or mediation of the IEP meeting as well. If it's an initial IEP, like I said, you need that written informed consent to implement the IEP. But at an annual review, the district can and must implement the IEP even if the parent disagrees with it, but the disagreement must be documented on a prior written notice. The district must implement it because the IEP is the district's offer to the free and appropriate public education for the student. So what options do the parents have when they disagree with a portion of the IEP? So for example, if the parent wants the child to have individual or small group APE, but the school district members of the IEP team think that the student can participate in the regular PE class and does not require this. The parents may use the dispute resolution options, so they can get mediation or facilitation of the IEP meeting. They can file a complaint. They can request a due process hearing. They may also revoke their consent for special education. So in general, as a best practice, if the parent is disagreeing with the student being in a regular PE class, you should work with the parent, explain the district team member's position, and present data. Assure that the parent that the student's progress will be carefully monitored in the regular PE class and reported to the parent. Offer to reconvene the IEP team in a shorter period of time to review the data, and consider asking the parents to observe the PE class. Obviously, this decision was made based on multiple factors. So if you can get the parent to understand those factors a little bit better with some of these suggestions, that could help. Also, as we know, the parent has the right to request an IEP meeting at any time to amend the IEP. So let's say maybe in this scenario, they agreed at the time, and then once they see it in action, they are now disagreeing. They do have the right to request the IEP meeting to reconvene at any time before the annual review.
Thank you, Megan. I just want to add to that. You do have to have parent consent to implement that initial IEP. But after that, on annual review IEPs, you don't. And parents misunderstand this sometimes. They think if they don't sign that annual review IEP, it can't be implemented. This is not true. And sometimes I get questions from service providers saying, well, I was at the IEP meeting and the parent didn't sign it. They disagreed, they didn't sign, but now my supervisor is telling me to provide the service anyway. What I would say to that is, if you're in doubt at any point in time about whether you should or should not provide a service, always check with your supervisor. Always verify what the situation is. But in those cases where the parent didn't sign it, now just an annual review IEP, not an initial, the IEP can and should be implemented, as Megan said. That is the district's offer of faith. The parent, may disagree and sometimes I think they get misadvised from some advocates and say, well, just don't sign that IEP. Well, they can, refuse to sign it, but the IEP will still be implemented. But again, always check with your supervisor if you're in doubt about it. And also, I agree with what Megan said, and try to help the parent understand. You definitely want to have that parent on board with you as much as possible, why it's important for their child to be with the regular phys ed class. Maybe they have safety concerns. Whatever the concerns are, try to work with them and collect data to bring them along. Okay, then we got a question on benchmark assessments, and this was one that I definitely had to defer to Randy to, but the question was, we are only to put a 0 if they refuse. What if they literally cannot do it? Is it okay to put a 1? They tried, but they didn't refuse. And putting a 1 is acceptable. They're not refusing, they're just limited or maybe very limited. So now if the student does refuse, they're capable, but they're refusing, then it would be a 0. Okay, next question.
All right. So if the special education class has aides, paraprofessionals within the special education classroom, do they have to come to the PE with the students? And if they do, what to do if they're just dropping off the students and then they leave? Who would you talk to? How do you basically remedy this situation? So once again, an IEP team decision. So this should be discussed and clarified through the IEP team meeting, before these services are taking place. The IEP team should have the data to support the need for aid support. What is the purpose of the aides accompanying the students to PE, and what services are they expected to provide during this time, such as keeping the student on task, assisting with the repetition of practicing a skill, assisting with clothing changes, keeping track of equipment, reminding of safety rules, etc. This would all be documented in that supports for school personnel section of the IEP, section 7. All the exact services do not have to necessarily be listed on the IEP, but it should be clear to the aides what their role is and what services they should provide. Consider having the aides attend the IEP meeting or meet with them to discuss the expectations. But if it's not on the IEP and it's a concern, you may have to ask to convene the IEP team to discuss adding this service in the IEP, again with data. So why is it a need and what services will be performed? And so just to clarify, what's going on, and so everyone can be on the same page.
Okay, and then we got a question about APE grants and budgets. In my PE budget, the amount they give is for AP and PE. Can I ask for an APE budget too? Are there any grants out there for APE to get suitable equipment? And asking for doing a meetup about grant writing, which is probably a great idea. What we found, and Megan went to our resources department to get some answers on this, and this is what she found. They suggested communicating with the building principal, first of all, about need for APE equipment, and funds from the District 516 allocations may be budgeted for APE. Then also we have these emergency grants, from ESSER and the IDEA grants, and these, newly allocated district funds for this from the elementary and secondary school emergency relief and the American Rescue Plans. There's also a semi-recent Dear Colleague letter from the Department of Education that addresses adaptive PE as specially designed instruction. And if the APE is identified as specially designed instruction, which it is, it's considered special education service and therefore can be supported with IDEA funds. Okay. So there's some ideas for you on that.
Okay, field day. So how can I include my students who receive APE on field day more? What about holding a separate field day for them? And I think we know where this is heading with the least restrictive environment discussion, but students with disabilities must be afforded that equal opportunity to participate in non-academic and extracurricular activities. They must be included with non-disabled peers to the maximum extent appropriate. So this requires obviously being creative and also making sure that we're having inclusive games where everyone can participate. And I think that part of that includes an inclusive environment. A lot of times these are outdoors. You just need to make sure everything is accessible for every student so that they could participate. I know that I did a quick Google and I found a really great website that has a lot of videos of how to adapt games so that everyone could participate in the game with different sorts of adaptations. So the school districts must take these steps, including the provision of supplementary aids and services that are appropriate and necessary by the child's IEP team to provide these opportunities for all children, you know, the equal opportunity to participate in these activities. So really a separate one would not be recommended, but just getting creative and making sure everyone can be included. And I will drop the link of that website I saw in the chat.
Okay. Okay, now we're going to talk about differing needs. Any advice for an APE class that has extremely different needs across the class? How to lesson plan for that? Oh boy. You know, once again, think about adapting equipment and the environment. This could be an opportunity to bring up scheduling. Does the group need to be broken up? Do some of the students maybe could participate in their general grade level PE class? So, and I think we are at the end of the questions that we received ahead of time. We did receive one question about how to designate, if you check yes, and the special instructional factors on in section 2 of the IEP, that question that says, does the child require specially designed physical education? If you check yes to that, that means APE. Specially designed physical education is adaptive physical education. So if you check yes on that, there should be specially designed instruction for APE. There should be a goal, APE goal, at least one goal, and the APE would be the service provider. APE teacher would be the service provider. If you've checked, if the child doesn't need that, if the child maybe just needs the program adapted by the regular physical education teacher, then you would check no on that. So I don't know if we have questions in the chat. We can go to that and see.
Bernadette, we do have some questions in the chat. The first one is regarding EMIS. Why does EMIS not recognize APE as a direct service? I've been told to keep it in the related services in section 7.
Yeah, I saw that question come up while we were talking. I thought, wow, that is a great question. I did not know that EMIS was doing that, and I will definitely follow up on that. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. You may or may not know, EMIS is like a completely different department than we are, and they really have very different kinds of responsibilities than from what we have, but we do communicate with them a lot. So I definitely will be asking them about that. So thank you for that question. I don't have an answer to your question on that.
I was going to suggest the same thing to discuss with our EMIS folks about that and get some more information. We can get back to you. Another question I see is, do you think adapted physical education is being identified in IEPs in sufficient numbers? I don't know if the person wants to expand on that question.
Yeah, so I wrote that question. So just as an example, maybe let's think about that small school district that doesn't have an adapted physical educator within the school district, and they have a student with multiple needs in the area of physical education. I just wonder if IEP teams would likely steer away from checking the box that says adapted physical education is needed for this student, or whatever that box says.
You know, that is such a good question. Megan and I probably, you know, want to cover our ears or whatever when we hear that, but it's like, I would hope that wouldn't happen. I would hope that it would be based, you know, and you know, of course, IDEA says, you know, based on the needs of the child. And if that's what that child needs, and that's what the IEP team does decide that's what the child needs, then the school district should make an effort, must make an effort to get that service. And I know that's one of those things where we're having to tell you something you don't want to hear, but, or at least the school district may. I think you probably want to hear it, but maybe the school district doesn't. But yeah, that's, you know, that is a, you know, we understand it can be difficult situations sometimes like that.
Okay, Bernadette, what is a qualifier for APE? If a student has behavioral issues but has basic skills, do we qualify them